This is the Making Waves podcast. My name is Dave Roteman. We're here with Senator Kevin Jensen, District 16. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you for visiting with me.
Thanks for being on. One of the issues you've been working on for not past 2 years is the proposed prison. Could you tell us where we're at with that and what's going on?
Well, I think where we're at right now is they're still trying to decide if it's supposed to be a prison or multiple facilities which would meet the same purpose. And the original plan from 2022 was to build a single prison in Lincoln County. And the day I heard about that location, the day before they announced it, the county and those of us that represent that district were really not given any heads up that they were even considering that site. But immediately we scratch our heads and question. I mean, it's 7 miles from the interstate. There's no infrastructure. There's zero infrastructure. It can all come in. 14 miles for sewage. I know they tried to run to Harrisburg, and Harrisburg said no because, they have their future growth plan for the city, and that did not fit their growth plan. Lincoln County it didn't fit their growth plan either. And then, of course, the group of citizens formed the NOPE group and filed a lawsuit, which is still hanging out there. We still don't have that Supreme Court decision. But the location itself just didn't make sense, going out in the middle of nowhere. It's a gravel road that gets to it.
And they didn't have public hearings about it, did they?
There was no zoning whatsoever. And that's
Right.
what the lawsuit was about.
Right.
The zoning would have allowed for public hearings, and maybe that location wouldn't have gotten far along it as it did, committing up to $52 million, tearing down an beautiful old historic barn, and basically destroying that whole farm place. And it's been basically a weed patch for the last 3 years while this is all going on. So where we're at today is, of course, the legislature this year did not approve spending of the money. It might have squeaked through with the money issue if the vote wouldn't have been quite the way it was with one errant vote. And I won't get into that. But anyway, the 2/3 needed to build would have never happened in either house. So that's why we're at the reset point now. And, I've had discussions with the governor. And, I've kind of made myself clear that in reading the executive order, it says a prison, and we've had that discussion. But he said it's palms up; it could be anything. So everything's on the table, and
That's good.
I believe that. He says that's his word. I think a lot of the people on the commission or on the current task force, though, believe that they still are looking for a single prison site. That isn't getting translated well to them. I think Attorney General Jackley, recently, last few days or last week or so, what he's been suggesting fits into, the everything's on the table kind of plan.
Good.
And I think that's where we need to be. A single level 5 or maximum security prison for 1,500 or 1,512, how many are prisoners, we can accomplish all that on current grounds if we distribute it. We're already in Sioux Falls, Yankton, Springfield, Rapid City. There's no reason we can't upgrade those facilities, add beds, and take advantage of the services that are being provided there. In the case of Human Services Center, we provide a lot of mental health and addiction kind of services there. In fact, for years we've been transporting prisoners back and forth from all the others to go get what we call restoration to competency training. So then we have the Springfield facility with, the governor's houses, the cabinet shop, the welding, the electric, plumbing, pretty much every skill anybody would need to enter the workforce, in any kind of a labor workforce. And we've kind of really ignored that for the last 3 years. Of course, MCI, Metalcraft Industries, basically being forced to leave because of lack of workforce. They provided a lot of money for the state. I believe there was about $1 million a year that paid for the incarceration of those employees, about 30 employees. And they were making enough money. They were being paid, I think, between $17 and $22 an hour. That they didn't get that money, of course, but that money went to pay for their restitution, child support, any other, and for their own incarceration. So there's locations within the fences that we have already that we could build more than 1,500 beds. And again, the maximum security makes no sense to almost everybody you talk to because we just don't run that many maximum security prisoners or inmates. There's a lot of speculation as to why we would need that. Of course, I won't get into that. I'll let other people talk about that part.
Well, I would like to clarify a couple things. First,
Sure.
about the MCI.
Right.
So they were providing jobs and for the prisoners, and they had to leave because they no longer had prisoners available to do these jobs, or what's going on there?
Yeah, former Warden Darren Young and I met with Terry Van Zenten was the owner of Metalcraft Industries, and their facility was actually within the fences at the current penitentiary.
In Sioux Falls.
In Sioux Falls,
Right,
yes,
okay.
I'm sorry. So they were kind of near the Jameson Annex, and they employed 30 inmates. Those inmates were all mostly anywhere from a 10-year to a life sentence inmates. Those 30, because of the type of equipment that he was operating, CNC machinery, $100,000 pieces of equipment, those people it took a lot of training.
Right.
They were very skilled laborers. Most of them were probably more in the life sentence range, but this gave them something to do every day. They woke up in the morning, they had their breakfast, they went to work, worked hard all day, went back to their cell, and they were model prison. According to the officers on the inside, those were your model prisoners. They had a purpose. They were going to be there for life, but this gave them a purpose. And
A reason to exist.
yeah, a reason to be there. So what happened about a year before, or about 3 or 4 months before it shut down, Secretary Wasco was evidently reviewing what we call the CGL report, and a lot of people don't know about the CGL study. That was happening at the same time as the DLR study. So the DLR was a physical building site study. The CGL study was operational study. And within that study, they suggested that when you're going to do training of this type, you should be training in inmates that are going to be released within 5 years, say, because you're giving them a job skill so they can leave and have a job skill. Well, these are very highly skilled jobs. And I believe according to DOC, they had started these discussions in September, and I think it was 23, that they were going to have to move those prisoners out and give him the last qualified, or people that were only going to be there a short time. So in the meantime, he's trying to figure out after that meeting in September, or those emails exchanges, they said that they came to him in January and said, you've got a week, and here's your new staff. They took the other staff, all those 30 that were working there, they couldn't come anymore, and gave them a whole room full of guys that have never been trained on any kind of machinery or whatsoever, and he just couldn't make it work. And this is so this is kind of at a point where, I made the comment to the secretary that, you shut them down. And she says, I didn't shut them down. They walked away. That was at a corrections commission meeting. But what was his choice? So he couldn't operate with unskilled labor. So yeah, he did have to walk away. The interesting thing about that, though, is MCI did have a lot of tools. They had a lot of things you could consider weapons and those things. But according to this CGL report, as far as following what we call chitting tools, that's CHITTING, checking the tools in and out from the job site, and then what we call shadow boards. It's peg boards with the outlines of the of the tools that are supposed to be up there. At the end of the day, every tool was in place.
Yep.
But when we had this riot, supposedly in 24, and there was blame put on MCI for not controlling their tools. Well, as it turns out in this report, it said that MCI was the only facility within the whole prison that actually did a good job of maintaining their tool inventory. So it was kind of interesting. A lot of the other weapons and contraband and everything else that was found did not come from MCI, but it was kind of insinuated that it was partially their problem that all these weapons were found. So
You blame the innocent.
I try not to point fingers, but obvious is obvious. I mean, when you look at certain things and you just question them and you think, am I the only one with these questions? And obviously I'm not. I have a lot of people that are following what I do, and I've done a couple videos and a couple interviews, and a lot of people that weren't paying attention are starting to pay attention.
It's good to shed light on this. Now, tell us a little bit about the maximum security prisoners. How many do we have? What kind of space do we have now? And why do we need a maximum security prison?
Well, the Jameson Annex was opened in 1993 with 540 maximum security beds.
So a new facility that
it's 30. Yeah, it's 32 years old.
Yeah, perfectly good.
It's still it's a pod design, which they're looking at building a pod style. The D pod, or the D wing we call, is a 192 bed wing that was added in or opened I think in 2006. So that's not even 20 years old yet.
Perfectly modern.
It's new. It's modern. That whole facility is modern. And when I first started looking at this, we had about 160 maximum security inmates, and it's about 2 years ago when I first started digging into it. At the end of 2024, I think there was 142. Right now we have 192. It fluctuates in that 150 to 180 range.
That's fair.
Of course, they come and go, and we have prisoner exchanges. And prisoner exchanges is something a lot of people question but don't really understand. And there's good logical reason for exchanging prisoners with other states. That gets a little more technical, but it's basically to protect the inmate.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if you get an inmate that's having trouble, or they committed a local crime that everybody was upset with, they'll swap with a prisoner in North Dakota that might have kind of the same issues.
Right.
And it is mostly to protect the inmate themselves.
Understood. So less than 200.
Less than 200. 192, I think, was the end of April count.
So we literally have 2.5, 3 times more space for maximum security prisoners than we actually use.
Exactly. Plus, in all of this, we started digging, and I started talking to some contractors and people that were involved with the building of the D-pod, and it is confirmed that the D-pod that was opened in 2006 is physically built for a second floor. The footings are way overbuilt for the second floor. The mechanical room, boiler room were all built to handle the extra 192 beds by adding a second floor. And there was actually a space left that could be used to put in an elevator shaft, not for the inmates to use, but for a service elevator.
Right.
Because everybody says, well, you shouldn't use an elevator, obviously transporting inmates, or moving them around, but that's not what it would have been for. So we've learned that over a year ago. Of course, DOC, there was a pretty strong pushback and an absolute denial that you could even add to that. And then we got the Banner Engineering confirmation that yes, it was designed for a second floor, and then we got the pushback that, well, the FAA will never approve it because it's, we can't build at the end of that runway, build up. Well, that was actually proven wrong too. That was approved at the time they approved the original blueprints for the building to be built up to 47 feet. So, and recently now DOC has come around and had to admit that yes, you could have a second floor. So if we had another 192 more maximum security beds in that pod, to me, I cannot see any possibility of needing 700 maximum security cells at the Jameson, or filling them, I should say.
Right.
So why would we need to build any more? I think what we really need to be concentrating on is our recidivism rate and our re-entry, and making sure when these prisoners get out that we're following them and have the ability to, while they're there. And I think they did start a new program called SAFER, SAFER, and that's to look at kind of the job skills of the people that are already in there, with the plan to help them when they get out. And supposedly they've been doing this for about a year now. And when asked at the last task force meeting how many of those people have actually been released, now, none. They have 1,400 portfolios, but we haven't actually been keeping track of those people. I keep bringing up places like Texas. Texas, what they do now, they went from a 40% recidivism rate down to about 20 or 21%. But what they do is they actually, almost every inmate has something to do, a job. They're on work release, or they put them to work within the system, so that when they get out, then they have a skill. They have something
They
they
have a
can
habit
do.
of working.
And they've been exactly.
Yeah, we've been doing exactly the opposite,
Working is
shutting
a-
down workers.
Yep, working's a habit. It just doesn't happen. If you go from doing nothing, your propensity is to continue to do nothing. So
Idle hands.
I think that's when we look at our recidivism rate, over 40% in 3 years come back. The other thing I think we need to look at is that most of those are what we call, or they call, technical parole violations. I'm not even exactly sure what that is or what it entails, or I know if somebody commits another crime, obviously that's a parole violation. They're going to be charged and everything. Recently, Representative Greg Jameson and I were appointed to co-chair the reentry summer study. And we've had one meeting, and we're working on gathering some data together to put together to this new summer study. Before we're probably going to try and meet by the end of the month for the first meeting. There'll be 3 meetings. But some of the things that we're looking at and finding out, I started digging into how we calculate our recidivism and asking questions like, is there a national standard? Does every state look at it the same way? And what I'm finding out is no. Every state kind of does it in their own way. When we get compared to North Dakota, what are we comparing? We don't really know. So, I guess I use the example, if somebody's out on parole and their neighbor sees them having a beer, is that a technical violation? I don't know. Does that put them back in? So those are the things I think we need to iron out first. But I think the job skills, the job training, work release, a number that I've heard recently was at the Jameson, we have about 200 inmates that qualify for work release. But what I understand is there's only actually 9 of those out on work release. To get answers is not easy, because sometimes you get the response, well, for security reasons we can't say. I think a lot of it's because it's on lockdown, and it's pretty hard to have a lockdown on everybody when you're releasing someone. They're coming and they're going, and of course the recent news in the last few days is extremely disturbing with the drug ring and all that. There's always been drugs and those things inside the prison. We know that. But why recently is it just, we have 9 deaths this year, and some of them are overdoses, and it's really hard to comprehend how somebody can be in their cell. I'll be honest, I worked down at the jail, Minnehaha County Jail, back in the 80s, and we did bed checks every hour. Nobody could have laid there all night long unresponsive. I really don't know what the policies are. What I do know from talking to officers is that there's been so many policy changes in the last 3 years that even the officers that work there don't feel safe working there anymore. So I really have to question what's the cause of all this. The question I'm asking right now, and I don't like to point fingers, but I have to on this one, is if we have a secretary that's been here for 3 years, and according to everybody I talked to, the conditions in there are worse now than anybody can remember, and it's not getting better. So are we so intent on focusing on building a new prison that we're ignoring trying to figure out policy changes or doing something internally to relieve all this? Yes, no, everybody's going to tell you, yeah, it's overcrowded, but it's been overcrowded for a long time. Overcrowding is not a new issue. So we're really trying to figure out, if it was me, and of course I would never be in that position, but if it was me, I'd roll up my sleeves and I'd say, okay, what can we do? I mean, we have a violence issue, we have a gang issue, we have a serious gang issue. Are we separating those gangs? Are we identifying them? Or are we letting the gangs all commingle in the same wings, in the same pods at the same time? It's all policy things. And I think some of those things could relieve some of the pressures. Of course, it's easy to talk from the outside. It's easy for me to say that. But I still think it's doable, especially after talking to a dozen corrections officers and former wardens.
It seems to me that the facilities are not the problem.
I've said this often, buildings don't kill people, but policy can. Yeah, the buildings are overcrowded. I will say this, when they say the hill is falling down, that's just a flat, I hate to use the word lie, but it's not true. We put over $30 million into that building in the last 13 years. Air conditioning, windows, tuck pointing, new cells, new doors, new security systems. Yes, it is a linear style prison, but if you look around the country at all of the federal facilities, most of the older federal facilities that are still fully functional are linear style prisons, not the pod systems. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with the pod system, but when we
but the linear style works too.
Yeah. A cell is a cell once they're in it. Mm-hmm. Moving them back and forth, yeah, it's a little more difficult. Maybe, I don't know. So when we look at newer nursing home facilities or new hospital designs, and they're built more in that pod style, mm-hmm. I don't believe it's any easier to move people around because you tend to have longer distances to move them, mm-hmm. more obstacles to move through. And when I looked at that prison design that was proposed for Lincoln County, I can't remember if there was 7 or 9 different pods, but there's open space between them. So if somebody's in the 5th pod down the row, how do they get there? Do you have to walk through the other pods? Is there underground? Underground tunnel would be the worst way. Mm-hmm. It looked like there was a lot of sidewalks, but in January, that's probably not the easiest way to move people around 2-3 times a day. Anyway, so I think the linear style still works. The problem with the Hill is there's twice as many inmates in there as it was built for. And that's why I keep coming back to, if we added the 192 beds on the D-pod, and the DLR study suggested a 300-bed minimum or medium center between the Jameson and the Hill, and there is space there.
Yeah.
There is plenty of space there to build a 300-bed unit.
And just for clarity, building a medium security prison or addition would not be nearly as expensive as a maximum security prison.
No, it would not.
It'd go up a lot quicker, too, because you can use cinder blocks.
In fact, you could probably build it more as a medium or work release center, mm-hmm. because we already have the maximum security right there at the Jameson.
Right.
You wouldn't have to you could maybe put some, low-level, medium security. There's a lot of different levels of security that mm-hmm. the inmates get screened for, and then they monitor where they should be placed as far as levels of security. But you could build that 300-bed unit there, and it would not be nearly as expensive. So we put that 300-bed unit there, 190. So what you could do is build that first. Mm-hmm. You could probably build that in under 2 years.
Right.
Take 300 of those inmates, 192 of them from the D-pod, move them in there temporarily while you built the addition on the D-pod, which might take another year and a half. Mm-hmm. Everything is there except the walls and building up, because all your infrastructure is already there. So now you've added, 492 beds. We're 400 beds. We need 400 beds to relieve the Hill. You have 492 just by adding those two things. And again, we haven't put a shovel in the ground outside the current fence of the prison, Sioux Falls prison.
Just speculating, you could theoretically go to Springfield, which apparently wants an expansion, has 1,200 beds there right now. You could probably put a minimum security or medium security facility right there on the current campus there.
In fact, if you look at the plans I've laid out there, I used the DLR for the basis because it made sense. It was a good study. You could add a 200-bed minimum security at the HSC at the Yankton facility. There's more than enough room. One of the reasons that they have a hard time staffing it down there is inconsistency in contracts. I'll get into the weeds a little bit just on that, because a lot of those services are provided through DOC employees, but also contracting with places like Lewis and Clark Mental Health. The problem is those contracts go through the Department of Social Services, DSS, and those contracts come and go every year. In fact, they're renegotiating contracts right now. So somebody with the level of experience that it would take to work there is probably not going to work on a year-to-year basis.
Right.
We should scrap those and hire people to work full-time there. There's probably enough in Yankton to cover another 100 beds.
Yeah, people want consistency and clear for their future. They want to be able to have a job and keep it for a couple, 3 years or longer.
Yeah, most people with educated type of or degree type of, like whether they're mental health counselors, addiction counselors, nurses, those kinds of, they're going to want
long-term employment.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, when we look down at Springfield, now there's a huge opportunity there. It really we should be limiting it to around 1,000. We got 1,200 in there right now. But what's really troubling is that facility is not meant for the higher level securities, but we have, what I've been told by people that work there is we probably have 200 gang members in there.
Oh.
They shouldn't be there.
That's a very minimum security system. Right?
Yeah, and that's, if you remember last fall, I believe it was, there was some semi-rioting and going on down there. What the families are telling me, they're hearing from their loved ones that are incarcerated down there, is that the gangs have kind of split the territory and in making it difficult for everybody, and that's kind of what prompted some of the window breaking and all that other things.
I see.
Now, you could build at minimum a medium security 300 bed unit there, but if you built a minimum security 300 bed unit and a medium security 300 bed unit, you could still separate those, and you could still build upon the industrial training that we do down there.
Right.
At the new prison, I know they talked about partnering with STI to come in and do these training programs. So there's a couple problems with that. How are we going to pay for that? They initially said STI staff said that they have grants to pay for that. Well, we all know grants come and go, especially with Doge. If they're federal grants, what's going to happen there. So if we start the programs that way, are we going to be able to keep them? And if we don't, are we going to pay for them ourselves? Are we going to have to continue the payments? Well, what's been so good down at the Springfield is the South Dakota Housing actually took over a number of years ago, took over the training and everything for the building of the governor's houses. They train the sheetrockers, the plumbers, the electricians, everything you need. They do the training. We also have, and I think it's Trailys out of Mitchell, brings in welding equipment. They bring in the physical welders, and they train welders there. And most of them, when they get released, are offered a job at Trailys. Well, some of those go then to Marmon or other places, because a welder can make $60, $70 an hour now if you're any good.
Absolutely.
And those are good skills. One of the things I keep saying about focusing on job training and following them outside the walls once they're released, making sure that they have a job and stay with a job. If it costs us $35,000 a year to incarcerate a person, and they leave and they come back, we're still paying $35,000 a year. If they leave and they have a good job, they're probably making $35,000 or more in the community, which is a $70,000 swing. We save $35,000. They make $35,000 and reinvest it back into the community. And I think there was one time I heard for every dollar you spend, it gets recirculated 7 times. So when we look at putting that $35,000 back into the community, we're actually expanding our economic development. So there needs to be more focus on trying to find work for these people. Now, we're South Dakota. We have 9 reservations. We have, unfortunately, a disproportionate number of Native Americans. A lot of them, when they leave, they do go back to the reservations. I'm not saying that they're the biggest number of our recidivism. I really don't have a handle on that number, but there's not much for jobs out there. But I know a lot of their families either moved to Sioux Falls or they're here a lot visiting with their loved ones in there. So when they do get out, they maintain that family connection. And I know there's a couple of groups I've been working with, talking with family members, and I get a lot of letters from inmates, and I get letters from corrections officers too, telling me their ideas on how things could be better. But maintaining that connection to the community, getting them out, those are all key in having them not come back. Mm-hmm. I think it's former Speaker Hallgaard estimated that if we could get our recidivism rate down to about 20%, we could probably open up 250 cells, 250 beds. I can't say cells and beds interchangeably because a cell holds more than one inmate, but so we just call them. So we could probably free up 200 or more beds if we could cut our recidivism in half. So those are things I think we really, really need to focus on. But it seems like right now what we're focused on is incarceration and locking down and putting the thumb screws to everybody
and building big, huge prisons that we don't need.
Yeah.
That we don't need because we need some space, but we don't need maximum security space.
Not everybody in there is a nice person.
Of course.
But we're treating them all. Apparently, we're treating them all the same now. If somebody's in there on a 1.5-year sentence for ingestion, we've got them in there with murderers and rapists, and of course, separation is difficult when you're overcrowded. I get that. I mean, I'm not naive to that, but I think we could have facilities. We could be building. We could also put a 200-bed minimum, or what we call it. They call them community work centers now. I guess we used to call them minimum security, but we could put a 200-bed unit in Rapid City. So if we do, I mean, just in what I've said right now, we've added our 1,500 beds. And we could be building all of those simultaneously, and it would not take 4 years to build those.
It would not take as long to build. It would be a lot less expensive to build each facility and per bed, and it would solve the problem very quickly.
And you disperse the workforce.
Right.
You're not going to have to hire an additional 400 people to work in a prison in the middle of a county when you're going to try and keep the other one open at the same time. We have a hard time maintaining staff levels right now. In fact, I think early on one of the policy changes was to call yourself fully staffed, you reduce the number of staff you had to for your needs. Now you can say we're fully staffed. That's a bit of an exaggeration. Right. But I have officers on the inside tell me that initially where 4 officers were required on a post at a time, they reduced it to 2. And in a lot of cases where it required 2, they reduced it to 1. And in 2 of those cases, 2 of those officers, I won't mention their names, one of them ended up in a lawsuit, and 2 of the inmates being convicted again of attempted murder on one of those guards. I call them guards. That's what we used to call them. They're officers now, I guess we call them.
I'm old school.
Yeah, me too. But when you think about it, yeah, it's going to make it much more dangerous. If there's 5 or 6 guys sitting around and they look at 2 of them, it's going to be a lot more difficult than to start if there's only 1 of them there. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I heard that was kind of disturbing was the shower area. Okay, yes, it's down in the lower unit. Of course, it's an old shower unit. It's going to have some rust. The paint might peel a little bit. Mm-hmm. Of course, we're not maintaining it. We're not fixing anything that they're complaining about. Mm-hmm. But what's disturbing is, well, it's so dangerous because when they're down there, there's only 1 guard there. Well, I'm not going to make any apologies for this statement. That's stupid because that's a policy. You could put 4 in there if you wanted to, and then it would be less dangerous. So to make a claim that it's dangerous because you don't have enough staff down there, well, that's a policy issue, pure and simple. That's a bad argument.
So we can go on this for a couple hours.
I could.
But just as an upshot, we have more than sufficient maximum security prison space. We don't really need a maximum security prison. And we could resolve this overcrowding issue in a very short period of time, just a couple of years, by building smaller facilities in places we already have land and fences.
Exactly. And I didn't mention earlier on, I was on Corrections Commission for 6 years. and it was on the Juvenile Justice Reform Oversight Council for 6 years. When we talk about the pipeline to the prison, and we could go on, we could talk a couple hours about this one too, is how we handle our juveniles right now. Kids that were stealing cars and doing other things when they were 16 years old and only getting a $100 fine and informal probation, do that when they're 19 years old. Now they're probably facing a prison sentence for doing exactly the same thing because we didn't hold them accountable as we used to. And that goes back to 2015, Senate Bill 73, the change there. So, in fact, I'm pretty sure I said when we were trying to repeal parts of that bill, I'm pretty sure in the Judiciary Committee, I stated that if we don't do something to hold these kids accountable within 10 years, we're going to be building a new prison. I said that in 2016. And here we are, 9 years later, and that's what we're talking about. Now, I'm not saying that it's all because of these kids, because crime is on, anytime you have a population increase, the crime tends to grow at a faster rate than so if your population's growing by 8%, your crime might be going by 9%, just because there's more opportunities for criminals. And those kinds of growths tend to bring in criminals, especially if they see us as being a little weak on crime. I know I covered a lot of ground there.
You sure did.
A lot of different issues. So.
Well, final thoughts.
Sure. Final thoughts are, I'm really hoping that the task force, I was not on the first task force, and I am not on this task force. And some teams I think I maybe have a bigger megaphone outside the task force. And what I'm really trying to provide is alternative ideas, because I think looking at the original task force, the DLR study, really should be given a lot more focus than the new study. In fact, probably 10 pages of that new study actually just regurgitated what the original study said, but with varying answers. But the thing is, I think we really need to look at, we already own the property. Everywhere I've talked about, infrastructure is already there.
And services.
Yeah, and the hill is not falling down. I mean, that's the one thing people just have to understand. Yes, it's an old building. It should be on the historic register. It should be. It's in, that building has been maintained. They don't like it, but that's not a reason to get rid of something. I mean, look how many other granite buildings we have around Sioux Falls that have been remodeled and are wonderful facilities now. The granite walls do not make it a bad place.
Kevin, thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome.
My name is Dave Ropeman. We've been here with the Kevin Jensen, Senator from District 16. This has been the Making Waves Podcast.